The sun, a warm golden eye in the clear blue sky, beat down on dusty road. Leo, oblivious to anything beyond the small universe he had created, pushed his battered red dump truck through miniature canyons and over carefully constructed hills of loose earth. A tiny plastic action figure, Captain Courage, his co-pilot, bounced precariously in the truck's cab. Leo hummed a tuneless tune, a sound of pure contentment as he navigated the imaginary treacherous terrain. The air smelled of dry grass and faint sweet honeysuckle from Mrs. Gable's garden down the lane. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the ancient oak at the road's bend. A sound as comforting and familiar as his own heartbeat. Suddenly, the familiar symphony of the afternoon was pierced by a low, insistent thrum. It started as a distant vibration, barely noticeable, a phantom tickle in the soles of his worn sneakers. Then it grew, a deep, guttural growl that vibrated through the ground, stealing the very air from around him. Leo paused, his small hand frozen on the toy truck. Captain Courage tumbled out. He squinted, looking down the long, straight stretch of dusty road, where the asphalt shimmered in the heat haze. A dark speck appeared, then another, and another, growing rapidly larger. The growl intensified into a thunderous roar that swallowed the gentle breeze and the buzzing of insects. Big machines. Not the kind that dug trenches or moved earth, but sleek, polished beasts of chrome and leather. A line of motorcycles, each one a gleaming marvel, roared into view. They were unlike anything Leo had ever seen up close. Their paint jobs were deep, almost black, reflecting the sun in dazzling flashes. The riders, hunched over their handlebars, wore dark leather jackets and helmets that obscured their faces, making them seem like a single, formidable entity. The sound was immense, a physical presence that made his chest vibrate. Leo felt a flutter of something akin to awe, mixed with a tiny prickle of unease. He instinctively took a step back, his hands subconsciously reaching for the forgotten Captain Courage. They moved with an almost menacing grace, a dark, unstoppable river of metal and noise. Leo watched, mesmerized, as the lead bike, even larger and more ornate than the others, slowed. A collective sigh of air brakes hissed as the entire convoy gradually decelerated, the thunderous roar settling into a deep, powerful rumble. They didn't stop at the general store, or the diner, or even the small gas station. Instead, they pulled up precisely in front of the old, dark house that stood sentinel at the very edge of town, the one everyone knew to avoid. The house with the broken windows and the overgrown yard, where shadows seemed to cling even on the brightest days. A chill, unrelated to the wind, snaked down Leo's spine. The spooky house's secret. Leo's gaze snagged on the old house, a hulking silhouette against the bruised twilight sky. Its gabled roof seemed to hunch like a giant with aching shoulders. Jagged teeth of broken glass lined the frames of its upper windows, reflecting the last slivers of light like malevolent eyes. The front door, a warped slab of oak, hung ajar, revealing a maw of impenetrable darkness. A cold knot tightened in Leo's stomach, a familiar dread that had grown with each passing day he'd seen the house. It wasn't just the chill of the evening air that raised goosebumps on his arms. He'd heard all the stories, of course. Every kid in town knew the tales of the Whispering Willow House. Shadows danced in its empty rooms. Unseen hands sometimes pushed open the creaky gate, and on windless nights a faint, mournful sigh was said to drift from its depths. It was the place for dares, for whispered legends, for the thrill of a good scare. But Leo had always felt something more profound than mere spookiness radiating from its crumbling walls. His grandma, bless her heart, had never indulged in the ghost stories. She had a different kind of warning, delivered with a sternness that left no room for childish fantasy. "Leo, darling," she'd said, her eyes losing their usual twinkle and becoming sharp, serious points. "That house isn't just old and a little creepy. It's unsafe. Truly, deeply unsafe. There's something wrong with it, something that goes beyond creaky floorboards and rattling windows. Promise me you'll never ever go near it, not even to peek." He remembered the unusual tremor in her voice, the way her hand had gripped his arm a little too tightly. It wasn't a warning about spirits or ghouls. It was a plea born of genuine concern for his well-being. And now, looking at the gaping darkness of the doorway, the splintered wood, the sheer air of decay that clung to the place, Leo understood her fear with a clarity that chilled him to the bone. The house wasn't merely a local legend. It felt like a silent predator, waiting. And then he saw them. The glint of chrome, the flash of leather, two motorcycles rumbling down the street, slowing, then turning, straight for the house. A brave little voice. The roar of engines had faded, replaced by the crunch of heavy boots on the gravel driveway. Rex, his face a mask of weary determination, watched as the 6 figures dismounted their motorcycles. Leather jackets, emblazoned with various patches and gleaming chrome, caught the harsh afternoon light. They moved with a practiced, almost synchronized gait, their strides long and purposeful. Their leader, a broad-shouldered man with a weathered face and an unreadable expression, led the way directly towards the old farmhouse door. Leo, hidden behind the gnarled trunk of the ancient oak, felt his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He clutched the rough bark, knuckles white. This was it. The moment he'd been dreading, yet also preparing for. He remembered the whimpering from the barn, the desperate eyes of the abandoned pups. He couldn't let them get inside. He had to be brave. He took a shaky, deep breath, the scent of damp earth and pine needles filling his lungs. His small hand trembled, but a surge of resolve, hot and fierce, ignited within him. He thought of the tiny, helpless creatures, entirely dependent on him. Fear still gnawed at him, a cold knot in his stomach, but it was quickly overshadowed by a fierce protectiveness. He closed his eyes for a split second, picturing their soft fur and innocent stares. He had to do it. With a sudden burst of energy, Leo pushed away from the tree. His scuffed sneakers hit the ground, propelled by an urgent need. He ran, not towards the safety of the woods, but directly into the path of the approaching men. His lungs burned, and his legs pumped furiously over the uneven ground. "Stop! Don't go inside!" His voice, usually quiet and hesitant, rose in a desperate, reedy cry, piercing the tense silence. It was thin against the vastness of the yard, but it carried an undeniable urgency. He waved his arms wildly, a small, flailing figure against the backdrop of the imposing house and the looming men. The leader, just moments from reaching the porch, paused, his hand hovering near the doorknob, and slowly turned his head. Listening to Leo, the roar of the engines, a guttural symphony of steel and fuel, abruptly died. 6 burly men in leather, their faces etched with a mix of curiosity and impatience, turned in unison. Their eyes, accustomed to the vastness of the open road, narrowed at the sight of the small figure. Leo, no bigger than a shadow in the encroaching twilight, stood with his arms outstretched, a tiny sentinel against the imposing backdrop of the decaying manor. Rex, the largest of the group, a man whose presence usually commanded silence, felt an unfamiliar jolt. He dismounted his bike, its chrome glinting dully, and with a surprising fluidity for his bulk, knelt. The rough concrete scraped against his worn denim, but he barely noticed. His gaze, usually a fortress of unreadable resolve, softened slightly as he met Leo's wide, earnest eyes. The boy's tiny hand, still outstretched, trembled almost imperceptibly. "It's not just spooky," Leo began, his voice a reedy whisper that nevertheless cut through the lingering engine fumes. He lowered his arms, clutching his t-shirt. "It's dangerous. Really, really dangerous." Rex tilted his head, his dark hair falling across his forehead. "Dangerous how, son?" His voice, a low rumble, seemed to vibrate in the still air. Leo took a hesitant step closer, his eyes darting towards the dilapidated porch. "The floorboards," he explained, his voice gaining a touch of urgency. "They're loose. Lots of them. And there's a big hole. Right in the middle, almost. Like the floor just fell away." He gestured vaguely towards the dark maw of the front door. "My cat, Whiskers. He almost fell in last week. He likes to chase the mice in there, but I had to pull him back." A flicker of fear, mixed with a fierce protectiveness, crossed the boy's face. "It's not safe for anyone, especially not for big people like you." The other bikers exchanged glances, their initial skepticism giving way to a shared flicker of concern. Leo's words, delivered with such conviction, painted a far more vivid picture than any of the local rumors. Rex's eyes, now fixed on the house, seemed to see beyond the broken windows and peeling paint, envisioning the treacherous interior Leo described. The old house wasn't just a local legend. It was a gaping maw, waiting. A glimpse inside. Rex watched the kid, Leo, still a little shaky but resolute. The urgency in his voice, despite the baffling words about scary whispers and the house being sad, was undeniable. A few of the guys shifted, exchanging uncertain glances. It wasn't every day a kid screamed at a gang of bikers to stop, especially not with such conviction. "He's right," Rex finally rumbled, his voice cutting through the unspoken questions. It wasn't a question, but a statement. He hadn't seen anything, felt anything amiss, but there was a flicker of something in Leo's wide, earnest eyes that resonated with Rex's own quiet observations. The house did feel off, a cold pocket in the otherwise warm afternoon. "Around the back," Rex commanded, nodding towards the overgrown side path. "Not through the front." They bypassed the imposing oak front door, its peeling paint and tarnished knocker seeming to scowl at their approach. Instead, they pushed through a tangle of thorny bushes and a riot of unkempt weeds, the air growing noticeably cooler as they moved deeper into the house's shadow. The silence back here was profound, broken only by the crunch of their boots on fallen leaves and the distant chirping of unseen birds. A broken window, like a gaping, jagged mouth, presented itself at the rear. Shards of glass still clung to the frame, glinting dully in the filtered light. It offered a limited, dusty view into what appeared to be a pantry or a small utility room. Rex leaned in first, his broad shoulders filling the gap, shielding the others slightly. The smell was immediate and unsettling, a cloying mix of damp earth, stale air, and something else. Something metallic, almost sickly sweet. He peered into the gloom. Boxes, water-stained and disintegrating, were stacked haphazardly against one wall. A rusted shelf sagged under the weight of empty jars. The floor was a patchwork of cracked linoleum and dark, spreading stains. There was no movement, no sound, just the oppressive stillness. Leo, emboldened, edged closer, trying to see over Rex's shoulder. His small hand clutched Rex's leather jacket. "The whispers," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "They're stronger in here." Rex didn't hear whispers, but he felt a distinct chill crawl up his spine, a sense of deep unease that went beyond the cold air. The house held secrets, dark ones, and the kid, somehow, was attuned to them. He pulled back, his brow furrowed, a new kind of resolve hardening his gaze. This wasn't just an abandoned building anymore. The hidden secret. The old farmhouse door creaked open, groaning on rusty hinges as Rex nudged it with his boot. A wave of musty air, thick with the scent of damp wood and something faintly sweet, enveloped them. Leo, clutching the worn teddy bear he'd brought, peered around Rex's denim-clad leg, his small face a mixture of apprehension and unwavering curiosity. The interior was a cavern of shadows, dust motes dancing in the slivers of sunlight that pierced the grimy windows. "See, kid? Nothing but old junk," Rex rumbled, his voice echoing in the stillness. He took a step inside, his heavy boots thudding softly on the warped floorboards. The others, a silent procession of leather and tattoos, fanned out behind him, their expressions ranging from casual disinterest to a hint of grudging intrigue. Then a sound cut through the silence, a faint, high-pitched mewling, almost lost amidst the creaks and groans of the decaying house. It came from deeper within, beyond the shadowy parlor, and into what looked like a dilapidated kitchen. Rex exchanged a glance with Leo, who had suddenly straightened, his eyes wide and fixed on the sound's origin. "There," Leo whispered, pointing a small, determined finger. "That's it." They followed, their footsteps surprisingly light now. The kitchen was in even worse disrepair. A section of the floor rotted away, revealing a dark crawl space beneath. And there, peeking out from a splintered opening, was a tiny, cream-colored paw. The mewling intensified, desperate and urgent. What they saw inside made their eyes widen with surprise. It wasn't ghosts or dangers they expected, but a family of little, fluffy kittens stuck in a hole in the floor. 3 tiny, whimpering balls of fur tumbled together in the dusty cavity, their eyes barely open. Above them, perched precariously on a joist, a scrawny calico cat meowed with heartbreaking persistence, her body tense with maternal anxiety, her gaze fixed on her trapped offspring. The mother cat was meowing sadly from above, and the kittens had fallen through a rotten board. Rex knelt, his gruff demeanor softening as he peered into the dark space. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered, reaching a large, surprisingly gentle hand towards the struggling kittens. Leo, no longer shy, pushed forward, a gasp of pure empathy escaping his lips. "We have to help them," he cried, his previous fear completely forgotten in the face of such vulnerability. The bikers, who had braced themselves for anything from a squatter to a collapsing ceiling, stood silently, witnessing the unexpected revelation. The danger Leo had sensed wasn't malicious, it was helpless and utterly dependent on their intervention. Rescue mission. The collective growl of the bikes had softened to a low rumble, a stark contrast to the urgency in their eyes. Rex, his face a mask of concentration, surveyed the narrow gap in the window. "Not big enough," he grunted, the words barely audible over the purr of an engine. Without further discussion, a hulking biker with a skull bandana produced a heavy wrench from his saddlebag. With surprising precision, he tapped at the frame, expanding the fractured pane with controlled force. Shards of glass tinkled onto the dusty ground, each sound a tiny chime of progress. Leo, his heart thrumming like a hummingbird's wings, watched with wide, anxious eyes. The mother cat, a sleek shadow, weaved around Rex's denim-clad legs, her meows a constant plaintive plea. Her emerald eyes, usually wary, were now fixed on the opening, trust gleaming in their depths. Rex, being the tallest of the group, took charge. He knelt, his broad shoulders filling the space, and peered into the murky interior. A faint, almost imperceptible mewling reached them. "All right, little ones," he murmured, his voice surprisingly gentle, a stark contrast to his rugged appearance. He extended a large, calloused hand, slowly, carefully, into the darkness. The other bikers stood in a silent semicircle, their usual boisterous energy replaced by a shared, quiet focus. Moments stretched, taut with anticipation. Then Rex's fingers reappeared, cradling a minuscule, trembling ball of black fur. He drew it out, revealing a tiny kitten, no bigger than his palm, its eyes still sealed shut. Leo gasped, a sound of pure wonder. He clapped his hands with uninhibited joy, a bright, clear sound that cut through the tension. The mother cat let out a deep, resonant purr, rubbing her head against Rex's leg with renewed fervor, her tail a vibrant question mark. One by one, Rex patiently retrieved the kittens. Each time a tiny, helpless creature emerged, Leo's delight grew, his earlier shyness completely forgotten. Two more, a ginger and a calico, followed, their soft cries a testament to their fragility. Finally, a fourth, a tiny white puff, was carefully brought into the light. The mother cat, now a whirlwind of happy chirps and purrs, nudged each kitten, licking their tiny heads with fierce maternal love. The last vestiges of fear melted from her eyes, replaced by an unmistakable relief. A safe place. The rumble of their engines had faded, replaced by a quiet hum of satisfaction that settled over the bikers. Rex leaned against the peeling paint of the porch, a rare, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. Leo, still buzzing with the excitement of their discovery, paced a small circle, his gaze drifting from the sun-drenched porch to the shadowy interior of the house. "We can't just leave them," Leo said, his voice softer than usual, tinged with a nascent protectiveness. "That hole. It's too dangerous. What if they wander out?" Rex nodded slowly, his eyes scanning the dilapidated structure. The house, once a source of unease, now felt different, almost purposeful. "He's right," he rumbled, his voice low. "We made a promise. Of sorts." A murmur of agreement rippled through the group. The initial shock had given way to a shared sense of responsibility, an unexpected but welcome shift in their collective conscience. This wasn't just about a boy and a cat anymore. It was about doing what was right. "All right," Rex said, pushing off the porch, his boots thudding softly on the overgrown grass. "Let's make this place safe." They began to scour the perimeter, their leather-clad forms moving with an uncharacteristic gentleness. Behind a rusted shed, partially obscured by thorny bushes, Leo let out a triumphant cry. He'd unearthed a thick, sturdy plank of wood, weathered but intact. "This'll do it!" he exclaimed, his eyes bright with purpose. Together, they wrestled the plank towards the house, the wood scraping against the dry earth. Rex, with surprising dexterity, knelt and measured the gaping maw where the floorboard had rotted away. With a few swift, precise movements, he positioned the plank, securing it firmly with some rusty nails they'd scavenged from a discarded toolbox. The once treacherous hole was now a solid, safe surface. Next, their attention turned to the interior. They carefully cleared away broken plaster and splintered wood, creating a small, sheltered alcove. Leo, His imagination sparked, envisioned a warm, inviting nest. He found an old, surprisingly clean burlap sack in the corner of the attic, which they carefully brought down. Rex, with a tenderness that belied his gruff exterior, folded it into a soft bed, arranging it in the newly cleared space. "Perfect," Leo whispered, peering into the cozy hollow. The late afternoon light, filtering through a dusty window, illuminated the makeshift bed, making it glow. It was a haven, a sanctuary crafted by hands more accustomed to throttle and wrench than to delicate care. The house, once a symbol of neglect, now held a promise of warmth and safety. Friends of Dusty Road. The rumble of engines became a familiar, almost comforting sound on Dusty Road. No longer did Leo dive behind the overgrown hydrangeas when he heard them approach. Instead, he'd stand by the mailbox, a small smile playing on his lips, and wave a confident hand. The bikers, in turn, would respond with a chorus of horns or a quick nod from beneath their helmets, Rex often offering a slight, almost imperceptible tilt of his head. His version of a friendly greeting. Their bond wasn't built on shared words or long conversations, but on an unspoken understanding. Leo knew they were good people, despite their tough exteriors, and they knew he was a brave kid with a heart bigger than his small frame. Sometimes, as Rex's powerful machine idled at the stop sign, he'd catch Leo's eye. No words were exchanged, but a quiet respect passed between them. A silent acknowledgement of the day a little boy's scream had changed everything. The old house, with its boarded-up windows and leaning porch, still stood at the edge of town. Its paint was flaking, the roof sagged, and the garden remained a tangle of weeds. Yet something about it had changed. The kids who once dared each other to touch its gate now looked at it differently. It wasn't just the spooky house anymore. It was the house where Leo saved the bikers. The whispers around town weren't about ghosts or monsters, but about a hidden danger, a broken step, and the quick thinking of a boy who loved animals and hated to see anyone hurt. One afternoon, Rex pulled his motorcycle to a stop beside Leo, who was carefully righting a fallen bird's nest in the grass. "Kid," Rex rumbled, his voice deeper than the engine's idle. "You got a good eye." Leo looked up, a faint blush on his cheeks. "Just don't like seeing things broken," he murmured, gently placing a tiny blue egg back into the nest. Rex watched him, a rare, soft expression in his eyes. He didn't say anything more, just gave a curt nod, a quiet acknowledgement of the boy's gentle spirit. The old house remained untouched, a silent monument to a moment of unexpected heroism. It was a place where kindness, not fear, had saved the day, all thanks to a brave little boy and his warning. And on Dusty Road, the sound of motorcycles passing by now carried a resonance of friendship, a testament to the fact that even the most unlikely people could find common ground in a shared moment of truth and a little boy's unwavering empathy.